Hey everybody, welcome back to the 2019 Honda Monkey build. I'm John 5XR, and today the excitement is around the TB parts camshaft. So this is something I was back and forth with for a long time. Wasn't sure if I wanted to go that modded. I really liked the way the bike was stock, but you know, along with this build and along with keeping progress going and seeing what these cool parts do to the bike, I decided that the time had come to upgrade the camshaft. So you know, it's really just one of those things that to achieve better performance, this is the one piece of that puzzle that you're really gonna need. We have the intake, we have the exhaust. It did a little bit for the bike. Actually, we have the Bazzaz tuner too. Those three things are all building blocks to making more horsepower, but each one of those things will not really make more horsepower in themselves. So for instance, the intake itself won't make much more horsepower, the exhaust itself won't make much horsepower, the tuner doesn't even matter unless you have an intake and an exhaust, because all it's doing is giving you more fuel. So the missing link in that equation is the camshaft. So that's what led me to go with the camshaft. Is we added the intake, the exhaust, the tuner, and it pepped the bike up. You know, it gave it a little bit better feel throughout the lower end. The gearing made a huge difference. The 14 tooth front, 36 tooth rear. So the bike's got a really linear, nice pull through the RPM range. But as with all 125 cc's, my Grom does the same thing. It kind of tapers out and falls flat towards the top of the RPM range. So what do? You get a different cam if that's the case. And what the aftermarket cams do is add a different profile to the roundness of that cam lobe, which opens the valves in different times than it did with the OEM cam. So basically, you're getting an optimized camshaft for more horsepower. There's not one cam that will do everything good. These cams that are out are more or less towards the mid to high range of the RPM scale. They're going to give you more power, more speed towards the top of your mile per hour range. You're not going to be more robust down low. So I think our gearing kind of makes up for that, so I'm not really worried about losing the low end. If it was stock gearing, I would think that a cam might even lose a little bit of feel, a little bit of power on the bottom end of the RPM and horsepower scale. So if you have stock gearing, you might see a little bit of loss of feel and performance on the low end, but it all depends on what you're doing. If you're wanting to go fast on the highway and you have a city commuter, or just a corner carver or mountain fun bike or whatever, then this cam's probably going to be fine with the stock gearing. But if you're like me and you ride a lot of dirt, a lot of stop and go, a lot of low RPM to high RPM swings, pulls, I guess you could say. Basically, if you're doing race, like an off-road race, then you're going to want to probably adjust the gearing to compensate for the loss, I think. It's hard to say if there's even a loss. I haven't had it on the dyno, but these are all things I found in my research. So anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to install this TB parts cam. We're going to see how the installation is. I've done a cam on a Grom before. It's not rocket science. Just follow the directions. The directions are very clear and concise. So what I'm going to do is post pictures of those directions so you can kind of stop the video and read if you want, if you're doing it on your own, if you don't have a factory manual. Yeah, directions, I mean by factory manual, not from TB parts. The cam does not come with directions, so you need that factory manual to guide you through the process. It's pretty important. And then what we're going to do is snapshot all those directions from the factory manual, and I'm going to show you that process of doing the cam swap. And at the end of it, it's almost a separate job to where you have to readjust your valve clearances. So what we'll do is we'll put it all in one big package for you, and what I'll probably do later is separate the the little parts that might be useful on their own, such as the valve clearance adjustments. So with that, let's get to the work. I hope you're enjoying the channel. I hope you're enjoying the videos and learning something. I know I learn something every time I turn on this camera. So thanks again for the support. Appreciate you watching. Let's get to work. Okay, so as you can see, we're halfway through the cam install, and now we're going to move on to installing the TB parts cam. So I'm going to open this up and we're going to see, I believe, something a little bit different than the OEM cam in the way that it's not going to have the factory decompression cam lobe on it, which I'll point out here in a second. So we're looking at the cam side by side, and you see there's a little provision right here. It's an extra lobe, and what this does is it relieves the pressure in the cylinder when you're starting, so it makes it an easier start. So a common thing on Groms and Monkeys when you change cams out is that when you go to start the bike, the starter isn't powerful enough to turn the cylinder to push the piston back and forth with the valve pressure in there. So basically the factory just put a relief in it, an automatic relief. It's pretty ingenious actually, but so you're not going to get that with the TB parts cam or any other cam on the market as far as I'm concerned. So I talked to TB parts and they say it's not a big deal. Anybody that I've talked to about cams, they say it doesn't matter, the bike starts fine. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I think emergency backup would be to put a higher powered starter in there, which I know there are those on the market as well, so I'm not worried about that. But side by side, unless you have a cam measurement tool, you're really not going to be able to see the difference in these cams just by looking at them. You might be able to tell a little bit. I can tell on this lobe here, it has a more narrow base circle than the stock cam, and this is true also for the other lobe. So basically a smaller or bigger base circle is going to be the low end of the motor. So with all cams on 125cc Groms and Monkeys, it's going to be about the higher end, the higher RPM horsepower gains. You're not going to get a huge lower end gain from a cam, and in certain cases you might actually lose a little bit of lower end. However, that's something that concerned me at first, but with the gearing that I have on the bike, I really don't think it's going to drop down too much. And worst case scenario, if we don't like it, if we're never in the top end of the RPM range, we don't drive on the street too much, whatever the case is, it's not a hard thing to swap back in. And this TB parts cam was super affordable. I believe it was $69, $70 or something. So that's really, really cheap, fun mod that you can try out, and it's not hard to do. So a couple of key things to remember about the process of getting this OEM cam out is that you're going to have some oil in places in the lower rocker arm cover plate. Definitely you saw some oil come out of there. And for the chain tensioner lock bolt, so you're going to see some oil come out of that as well. So just be prepared. It's not a lot, but it'll spill on your floor, so it might startle you. So just be aware of those things. Also, you saw me thread a tie wrap through the timing chain, and this is in case the timing chain actually falls back into the cylinder, which it can do. We don't want it to be irretrievable. We want it to have some sort of way to grab it. So it's just a little piece of insurance. Also, you saw me use a couple of little tricks. The first trick was an oversight of mine and just a shade tree workaround, but I didn't have the Allen key big enough for that for the crankshaft bolt cover, the little plate, this thing right here. I did not have the key for that. That is a big hex, so just have some big hexes around if you're going to do this. And what you saw me do is basically take a 10mm bolt, which fits right in to that hex perfectly, and I used two 10mm jam nuts and just did that old stud removal trick, and I was able to work it out. So luckily we were able to get away with that because it's late at night right now, and I didn't want to have to run all the way down to our shop where our race cars are at and stuff. And that's about it. So a couple little surprises along the way, but nothing that we couldn't figure out. So let's get this TB parts cam in the bike, and we'll go through that process the same as disassembly, see if there's any surprises along the way, and then we'll chat about it at the end of it, and finally we'll start it up and see how it works. Okay, so now we're up to the point to where we need to adjust the rocker arm and valve clearance. So you see there's a little tappet here that hits the top of the valve. So the cam is going to push this rocker arm and open and close that valve through this stud here. So what we need to do on the intake valve is have a clearance of 0.004 inches or 0.10 millimeters. So I got my feeler gauge here. You can see the measurement. And this is tricky because it's not easy to work in here, but essentially what we have to do is get this feeler gauge in between the valve tappet and the top of the valve there, and we want to adjust it to where it's putting pressure enough on this feeler gauge that we can still move it. So we don't want it to be loose, but we don't want it to be too tight. And the tricky part is there's a special tool that you can get that holds this in place and then allows you to turn this jam nut to keep it held in. So I don't have that tool. I wish I would have ordered it from TB Parts, but I didn't. So what we're going to do is give it our best shot of tightening this jam nut, and hopefully it doesn't tighten down too much on the feeler gauge. So it didn't, so maybe we got lucky. So let's pull out the feeler gauge here, and we can see there's still a little bit of movement, which is what you want in the valve. We can go check it again, and it shouldn't be easy to put this feeler gauge in, but you should be able to get it in there. So I think we're okay here to where it slides in, but it's not easy to get in. Yeah, so we got it in there and we're able to move it around, but not easily. It's a little bit of resistance on it. I'm not going to show the bottom, which is the exhaust valve, because that's a really difficult angle for the camera, but the adjustment range on the bottom, the clearance you're going to want to use on your feeler gauge is 0.007 inches or 0.18 millimeters. Well, that concludes the install of the TB Parts Honda Monkey camshaft. It's the same camshaft that they offer for the Honda Grom. This is a well-known cam throughout the Grom world already. and nothing but great things are heard about it from my research. So the install was pretty smooth. It took me about 2 hours to do this, but I was also filming, so that delayed it a lot. So I would say about an hour or so of time to do this whole project. It's really not hard. Just make sure the bike's cooled off before you start, and make sure you have some of the parts that are necessary, or you'll get hung up like I did. So the Allen key, the big Allen key for the crankshaft bolt, feeler gauges for your valve clearance check at the end. These things are all little hiccup points that if you don't have them, you're going to have to stop your project and go find them. So just a good thing to have before you start. Other than that, the bike started up great. It sounded a little bit more aggressive than it does normally, but it's hard to tell. It's late here in the shop, so I'm not going to be able to ride it until tomorrow. And with that ride, we'll do a little bit of a moto vlog. We'll see how it is. We'll see if it's going to get me up to that 70 mile an hour mark, which I stopped worrying about a while ago. So kind of went for the torquey, off the line dirt riding setup. But this cam will be cool because I think it'll blend in well with that setup already and get me some more speed all around. So pretty anxious to try it out. I'll do a separate video for the ride and review. And other than that, I hope everybody learned how to do this process. Once again, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'm really happy with where the channel is going, and that's all thanks to you. So we'll leave it there. Enjoy your cam if you're installing one. If you're thinking about it, check out the ride and review, and we'll elaborate a little bit more about it to help you with your decision. Thanks again.